So, hello, how's everyone doing? How was week 4? Are we at 4? Yeah, week 4. Week 4. Treating everyone. Okay, cool. To this week we're gonna go over half right triangles. So if you've never made them, they're honestly a lot of fun in my opinion. I feel like because they're, a little different than just your normal half square triangle. More fun. Brooke, I see that you have your board set up. Do you want to go ahead and do this?
I also like that you're called Brooke too.
I know.
Can you guys hear me?
Okay, your
Yes,
looks a lot better than mine. Hold on, let's pin you.
Can y'all hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, sorry.
Okay, yours looks better than mine.
Oh, okay. Well, I came prepared this time, unlike last time.
Okay, cool. Same.
Okay.
Awesome.
Um,
Yeah, I'm just gonna turn mine off actually.
You guys could work together. Don't you have to work on yours anyways?
Well, I do. You're right, but for the sake of everyone can see Brooke's screen big, right? Like I made it a pin. So I just want to make sure that her screen's like big and beautiful and
okay, let me pull up the pattern, make sure I'm not misspeaking here on anything, calling one HRT the wrong one. Looks like a fair number of people were already successful, so
yeah.
that makes me feel pretty good. I did my best to like have things at different stages. Okay, so, oh, actually I had an idea. For those that are newer to half rectangle triangles.
Oh, I was calling them half right triangles. I don't know why I always do that.
Half right. Well, and some people call them HSRs, half square rectangle.
Oh no. I think I for some reason like see a right triangle, so I always say half right triangle. It's also a lot easier to say.
Yeah, that's true. It is a right triangle.
Okay.
All right, tomato, tomato. So I want folks to understand kind of how HRTs work intuitively, because I think that can help prevent, mistakes down the line, because it's easy to kind of mix things up, because direction does matter for HRTs compared to HSTs, so here we've got, this is one of the HSTs from last week. And what's great about half square triangles is that they're square. So, no matter which way you rotate them, they're taking up the same footprint, right? Because it's equal length on each side. So so right now, like these are kind of analogous in that you've got the brown in the bottom left here. And so, but if I rotate the square, it's still a square. But if I rotate this, it suddenly is a different footprint, right? It's horizontal and not vertical. So this is why direction matters for half rectangle triangles. So I hope that like just helps explain. And if you wrote, so I started it like that. And you can't just, if you rotate this 180 degrees, so keep in mind, the brown is in the top, or sorry, bottom left, purple in the top right. If I turn this 180 degrees, the seam runs the same direction. I've just flipped the colors. So you can't just simply rotate a half rectangle triangle to get the seam to go the other direction. Does that help at all? Or just
Yeah. No, and it's really obvious when you're sewing together and using prints, because if you're using solids, you can, use both sides of the fabric, but you do have to be very, very careful when you're using prints. Um, yeah, so.
Yeah, so I hope that just kind of helps you wrap your head around how they're different from half square triangles. Um, and so why direction ultimately matters. And so if no one has any questions there, so that's why I had, even though you're cutting these same size of rectangles from your colors, I had you label them B versus C. And hopefully that helps to, you can just get through all of the B HRTs, knowing that all of those are going to go, the seam's going to run the same direction for all of the Bs, and then get to your Cs, knowing that the seam is going to run the same direction for those. Because even when I was kind of prepping for today and trying to do both of them at the same time, and I was like, wait, hold up before you mess up. So sorry, my computer's being a little slow, and I'm trying to
Yeah,
have a lot of
if
different
you guys
views at once.
haven't made a little color guide, this is in the pattern I printed out, and it's going to be super, super helpful for this. So
Yeah,
definitely do
agreed.
that if you have.
Yeah, it's easy because you want to make sure that you've got, the two for each HRT, that you've got the right two colors paired up, and that you're sewing those in the same, in the right direction. So hold on, that is actually A, or that's C, sorry. Let me grab my A's here. Okay, so the step here is really first to, once you've got, so this for me is this is my color 1, and this is my color 4. So this is my HRT 1-4. And you can pick whichever one you want, but you draw on one of the rectangles on the back side, a diagonal from the top left to the bottom right. And I know this feels counterintuitive because you're thinking, well, I actually want the seam to go from the top right to the bottom left. So you'll just have to remember that the line that you're drawing, that diagonal across the rectangle, is actually opposite direction from the seam, how the seam is actually going to look in the final HRT. And so once you've got that line drawn, then you're going to match up that line with the opposite corners. You're putting these right sides together. So this is my color 4, and sorry, I'm using solids, so it's less obvious. So this is face up, and this top one is face down. I mean, it's similar to, how you would sew 2 at a time, half square triangles, but obviously this looks quite different once you're placing your pieces together. But then this is kind of where you start to see, okay, now I'm going to sew on either side of this line. And so my seam is going to run that way. And so that's kind of a nice check. And so if I'm lazy, I just take them to the machine like that. Sometimes I'll just this is a clip. I'll just clip one end, or earlier I got fancy, for me at least, and pinned, which a lot of you might be in the practice of doing anyway, which is good.
And just to clarify, you're running your drawn line, exactly into the corner of your bottom rectangle, correct? It's like they're lining up with exactly into the corners.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So I did not, I lost the second half of my labels, so I'm going ahead and grouping what I need to do in the bottom. Yeah. Prepping all the lines first and then going in.
Does anyone have any questions so far?
I do. If you are using prints, and I know that it's not recommended for this pattern, but if you are using prints, is there a preferable way to have your rectangles cut so that way they are situated in the final HRT any certain way? Or is there really no controlling it?
So I think if you cut your, well, it's interesting because in this pattern, the HRTs will end up being rotated. Where did I finish the HRTs? Like if you're looking at it, the quilt straight on, some will be like this, some will be like this. And yeah, that's a good question. For example, if you knew all of your HRTs were going to be, you know, be vertical, then I could probably say, well, then cut it so that your prints are, you know, like this is the top and this is the bottom, and just cut your rectangles, you know,
Your
vertical.
print is like long ways on your rectangle versus across the short way, right?
Right, because if you think about how it's going to actually turn out, so I've got my rectangles laid out here. This gets flipped over like this. So you would have the print, you know, if right side up is here, then this would be the top, and your print would be facing up that way. Does that make sense?
Yeah. But then the other one, the other
Go in the other
one of the two at
direction.
a time, it would be the opposite because you have to, unless they're all going to be in the same, like purple on left, white on right,
Oh, you're right.
then it's going to be upside down. So there
Uh,
really is no controlling it,
well,
I
no,
guess.
actually, you could have it. It would still be, I think it could be right side up.
Oh, yeah, that is true.
I mean,
In
this is
the
why.
ultimate, as it gets sewn into the quilt, it will get rotated. So you know, there's maybe no
And
winning
it's
with that. And
Yeah.
there's no like direct or specific way the quilt even there's no top or bottom of this quilt anyways.
yeah, but you
So
could, yeah, maybe if you did want your print running the same direction, you know, across all of your HRTs, um, you know, so as they're rotated, they're kind of like, I try not to give away the design, but
I know that's why we say no direction friends.
yeah, right. It's just hard.
Yeah.
Or, you know, you can have a directional, but as long as you know, aren't picky, yeah, that's fine too.
Yeah, that's my what I say for this. If you don't care, then it doesn't matter. I'm just going along with you.
All right, so if there's no questions so far, so once you've taken them to your machine, sorry, I hope I'm not throwing anyone off because I've got all different, my colors are different here. You know, you'll have your seam a 1/4 inch on either side, and I'm happy to report that the room for trimming is quite a bit bigger on these than it was for the HSTs.
Yeah, confirmed in the chat, in the
Yeah.
week 4 chat. So if you're worried about that, don't be.
Yeah. And then similarly to when you were making your half square triangles, you will slice this to generate the 2, and they will be identical. So that's the 2 at a time. So when you do at least this 2 at a time method for HRTs, it produces 2 identical HRTs. Sometimes I feel like that's a good thing. Sometimes I wish they were complementary, but
Yeah.
basically it makes these 2. And the trimming, I press these open. I think that is what I instruct in the. Oh, I should have looked at that.
Yeah, it says press open.
Okay. And again, you can, if you have a strong preference against that, that is fine. I just press mine open. I like how flat I can get the seams. But you're welcome to press to one side if you like. And then trimming, I think, is the fun part. It's like the tricky part, but it's fun, especially once you wrap your head around like what the logic is behind it. So which one is probably best? One of these I thought I had. I'm gonna find one that with a lot of contrast so it's easy to see.
You mean you don't want to use the same two
I
fabrics?
should have, just as an homage.
Make it really confusing for everyone?
You guys don't see that scene?
It's
All
weird.
right. We are trimming these to 4 by 7.5. And you can use a lot of different rulers as long as they are at least 4 by 7.5. I've got a 6 by 12 here. And what I find really helpful, if
That's
you
a
have it
good
on
size
hand.
ruler. I like that.
Oh, you don't have this one?
No, oof, I gotta get that one.
You know, another one I discovered is this one's better for this purpose, but I found an 8 by 14 and I actually bought it because it works really well for a pattern I have coming out. But I've also just found it to be a nice addition to the collection.
Yeah, sometimes the 24-inch is just too long.
Yeah, it like stabs
And
me in the gut.
yeah, so I would like a short version of it. I
Yeah,
have a 6, yeah.
yeah, this is really nice. I've got this little step stool here. Should use that. So I've got washi tape. I don't know if everyone has washi tape. Some people ask me like, what is that? But you can use any kind of tape or, a similar marking tool. And actually you could even draw. I have learned that you can draw on your acrylic rulers with a Sharpie and it comes off with rubbing alcohol.
Yep.
That was a big revelation.
Also possibly comes off with a dry erase marker too. I've used dry erase
Yeah,
markers to remove permanent marker before.
Oh, like you scribble over the permanent marker with the dry erase?
interesting. You could also use dry erase marker for this too. I mean, a small
Yeah,
one that
totally.
has a lot of ink.
Yeah. So I start off by, well, and I guess actually you first need to know, all right. Actually, I don't think it really, I realized today as I was trimming, like maybe it doesn't matter. So I'm starting with my 0, 0 mark in the top right. So I'm treating this top right corner of my ruler as kind of my 0, 0 starting point. And since I want to trim my HRTs to 4 by 7.5, these are the dimensions that I've marked off using this tape. And I just put it out, I think we actually demonstrated this, or you did, Taylor, with your ruler for HSTs. I just like to put it a little bit outside of that line so that I can, make sure that the fabric extends, that I'm not losing any, that I've got a full HRT underneath these dimensions and nothing's going to get, I'm not going to be short, if that makes sense. So I just put it just to the left of this 4-inch mark and then just beyond this 7.5-inch mark down here. And so now I know that's how I want my HRTs to get trimmed to. And actually, I don't want that one. I want this one. This is the fun, tricky, but also fun part. So since the seam is not 45 degrees like it is on our HSTs, you're not actually trimming so that that seam ends up in the corner of your trimmed HRT. So if you can kind of think about it, you want to make sure that once this HRT, once it's finished, meaning it's actually sewn into your quilt top, you want to make sure that those seams run into the corner of the finished HRT. And so what that's going to be is obviously the unfinished dimensions are, you know, they have a 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way around. And so where you actually want those seams to run through is a square 1/4 inch inside of those 2 corners where we'll be trimming to. Does that make sense?
It's so hard to explain.
So basically,
yeah.
if you think about it, like here, I'll even maybe demonstrate this. So if these are the dimensions, 4 by 7.5, that I'm going to trim my HRT to, the finished one is we're gonna no longer have that 1/4 inch. We're gonna no longer have this 1/4 inch, you know? So everything's gonna be shrunk. The finished size is gonna be shrunk a 1/4 inch all the way around. And so that's why when you're trimming, the idea is I just from this since the seam runs from the top right to the bottom left, I'm starting in the top right corner and I'm going down a 1/4 inch and over a 1/4 inch. So basically a square 1/4 inch in, that's the mark that I've circled. I've used a Sharpie here. You could use a dry erase or something else. And that's the point through which we want to make sure our seam runs. And then it's this exact same thing over here in the bottom left. I've measured over and up a square 1/4 inch. So that's the point that I've circled. Can you see? Oops, down there. And so you'll find when you're trimming that, you know, the seam is not going to run through the actual corners of the trimmed dimensions because, you know, it's not 45 degrees, which is what it would have to be, you know, to continue through that corner. Let me see if I can demonstrate this. Maybe I need to erase my nice impromptu squigglies here. I now have this nice big bottle of rubbing alcohol that stays in my sewing room. And ooh, has a nice pungent smell. So you kind of need to, I basically just pick one point. I'm going to pick this top right one, and I just try to get that point somewhere in this general vicinity in the top right corner on that seam. And then, you know, you're probably going to need to slide your ruler over a little bit to keep that point on your ruler directly on top of the seam while bringing this other point that you've circled onto the seam also. And then of course, once you've got that, you want to make sure, you know, you've got fabric all the way around so that you're not going to be short on any dimension or not have a full rectangle.
Can you show what it would look like if you place that upper right 1/4 inch square too high and part of the HRT was not sticking out from the side of the ruler?
Like that or something. Or I think what
Yeah.
happens is I could do it like this and I'm missing some over here. You can see. So you really do have to check.
When I'm doing my trimming, I will find the seam with those 2 points and then end up sliding my ruler up and down the seam until all parts of the block are sticking out from around my measuring point.
Yeah. So yeah, you can just kind of gently slide it around. And then, okay, I will preface this. I'm a righty. If you're a lefty, so I'm going to trim right and top as a right-handed quilter. If you're a lefty, you'll probably turn everything 90 degrees counterclockwise, but everything else is the same. You want to line up your 2 circled points to be on that seam. kind of sliding your ruler around to make sure you've got fabric on all sides, and then you'll, trim left and top. Okay. Any questions there? I mean, this is the trickiest part, I think.
Yeah, because once you cut, there's no going back.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you got to follow it through. And just making sure that you get those, I mean, double, triple, quadruple check that you've got the right points circled, because those are, your guideposts. Well, and also, of course, you want to make sure you've got the right dimensions taped off. That's a little bit more straightforward than this, but I hope it
And
makes sense. Yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say, before you cut them in half, make sure, I would just double check and make sure that the directions are correct. Like you have the right amount of the left facing ones and then the right amount right facing ones. Because once you cut, then yeah, there's really no going back.
Yeah, and you can just check that once you've sewn them. You can just peel back one of them and say, okay,
Yeah.
wait, was I supposed to have I think people call this a left leaning.
I know, I never know. It's like, I guess
I
it
think,
just
I
depends on.
learned that only recently. I was just calling them, I don't know, top left to bottom right.
And
Yeah. In the
in the
pattern, that's
it's L.
left.
Yeah, it's L
Yeah.
HRT and then right or R HRT. And the left is the one that you're showing right now. So it's L HRT. And then the numbers.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah. So, yep, much
Yeah,
easier
I
to
just like whatever the direction the diagonal is pointing, like up, is
pointing up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's subjective, I guess. But.
Yep. So I don't know. Should I go for it?
Got it. Got her up.
Shoot. All right. YOLO. And then now that we've got this corner is trimmed, I just rotated 180 degrees and now I line that trimmed edge up with the dimensions that I've got taped off on my ruler, and really making sure that the edges of the fabric are running through those lines on my ruler. And if I've done things precisely enough, the seam should automatically run through those points once you've got it lined up. Which they do. So, and I will say again that because these blocks are pretty large, I wouldn't fret too much over anything that's not absolutely perfect, but that's also my personality, or at least when it comes to quilting. I shouldn't say I'm like not a perfectionist, but I'm like on team it'll quilt out typically.
Or it'll stretch out. You can always do a little stretch.
You'll see that there's a little bit like these corners are blunted because we actually want the seam to run through different points than what's actually the corners. So it feels strange, especially if you've been doing a lot of HSTs, you think, oh, this doesn't look right. But have no fear.
No fear.
I think one of the most concerning things as someone that was new to HRTs whenever I was the shapes I was creating in these blocks as I was trimming. So like making the first two cuts where you as a right-handed person, you make the right side and the top cut, and then you lift up your ruler and you have the weirdest shaped block from that. But because of the way you have to rotate it and do the same thing on the other side, it makes sense. But
Yeah.
always doing
Satisfying.
HSTs and cutting the sides, and it's still generally a square compared to this where you cut the sides and then you have like this weird like rhombus whatever whatever shape it is.
Rumpus.
Wow. Bringing us back to like 8th grade geometry. Love it. Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, if you've seen some more of my designs, you will know how much I love HRTs. They just opened up a whole new world for me.
They're so fun.
So I hope those of you that are trying them for the first time fall in love with them as much as I did. And like, oh, I guess I should say that, since this is an A piece, okay, so what did you call this? An R?
An RHRT.
Yeah.
Because
So
it
I
goes
would,
up to the right side.
okay, yeah. I mean, you might want to sew all of, I don't know, it's up to you how, if you want to try to do things in bulk, or it might be easier to just keep things straight by completing all of your R's and then going back and then doing all of your L's. But in any case, I would recommend, trimming all of your ones that go one direction because, you've got those markings on your ruler. And so it just makes it quick. But essentially, see where am I? L1. Do I have a completed L? Yes, I do. Okay. The method is exactly the same. You'll just have to mark the those those points that are 1/4 inch inside the corners. You're obviously going to now mark them from the top left and the bottom right. So from here, I go down and over, and it's this mark here. I like to circle it so that I can actually see the seam going directly through that point as opposed to maybe, just marking on top of that point with my.
Yeah, that's really smart. I noticed that you did that, and I was like, I don't know why I didn't think about that because I usually just like jam my marker on top of the point, and then I can't see it.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and then, sorry, my tape didn't go all the way over here, but I know I'm at 7.5. I want to go up and then over 1. And it can really depend on your ruler. I've seen some funky rulers that don't have, or maybe the 1/4 inch lines are not as obvious. So just be careful, or you probably know your ruler better than anybody. I just am really used to mine, and they're like all the same OmniGrid ones. So
Do you have tape underneath it? Like, what do you have around all 4 sides?
Oh, sorry about that,
I like
guys.
grippy tape.
It's okay. This is a hack I found. Okay, so you can either buy, these True Grip things.
I have those, but I don't like them that much because I feel like a lot of times they're not underneath where I need them to be.
Um, I got my friends told me about this. It's actually medical tape. And
Oh.
I will say, I think I bought some cheap medical tape and she gave me some of her really nice medical tape, and hers is much more, I think this is the better one. It's much more see-through than like this is one I did with my cheap medical tape, and it's kind of opaque. So get the good stuff.
Okay. And it really, really grips it down.
It seems to. I mean, it's probably not as grippy as some of these things, but I mean, I've had it
Better
on
than
for
nothing.
years. So yeah, for sure. For sure. And I was like using some acrylic templates that I had, and I was trying to cut around them, and they were just sliding around like crazy. And I was like, well, this is not helpful at all. But I had like
Yeah, I like
a
the
few of these
creative grid
left.
one. The creative grids one, they are like really groovy, but they're a lot. I think they're more expensive.
Yeah.
So, anyways, I just totally diverted your tutorial.
No, no. And you know what? I think I used to, when I would switch from trimming my HRTs where the seam was going one way, when I was switching to the ones that went the other way, I think I would move my tape, but I realized you really don't need to.
Yeah.
So yeah, same method, just new points. Trim this sucker. Turn her around. I am sometimes surprised, or I think I did those first two trims perfect and I'll line up for the second couple trims and I'm like, why do these points not line up? But I think stuff like, I think I press really hard with my rotary cutter, which could be maybe because I don't change my blade enough. So I'm having to apply more pressure, which means I end up sliding the ruler around. I don't know. There's a lot wrong with me.
I should change mine. Definitely do for a new
But
blade.
blades are like good blades are not cheap.
I bought a 10 pack, so I feel like I'm good for a while. I just still don't do it. I thought it would really make me change it often, but yeah, I think it was like $70 for a 10 pack. Like it was a lot.
Yeah. And I'm mad
I
because
was
I
like, okay,
sprung for, I think they are Olfa and it's the Japanese
titanium ones or
steel.
the
Yeah, the titanium. But something must have been wrong with that batch because all of them skipped. And I was,
oh really? It's
yeah,
terrible.
but the reviews were really good. So maybe I just got a bad set.
Yeah, because I think that's what I have, and I never had any skipping.
So yeah, that,
Yay.
my friends, is HRTs in a nutshell.
Wonderful.
There is a question
And
that is
this,
not pertaining to
oh,
HRTs in the comments, if you would like
okay.
to look at that.
Is it for Brooke?
Oh, it's for either, or it's for anyone, really. But it's a question that says, this person is new to quilting and is worried about seam allowances. Are there any tips for sewing both straight and making sure that it's a 1/4 inch seam allowance? So like keeping it steady straight
Yeah.
and making sure your 1/4 inch is still measuring up.
So my number one advice is actually I do have a Instagram highlight story kind of about this. It's not the best. I'd like to read it, but if you go to my Instagram and then go to seam allowance, I like briefly go over this. My advice is definitely get 3 2.5 inch strips of fabric, and then sew them together using a 1/4 inch and measure that center strip. Um, and if it's not exactly 2 inches, then your seam allowance is either too big or too small. And depending on your machine, you can potentially adjust your needle over a little bit. And it's like in barely small increments, so you can just keep doing that. I suggest like cutting a bunch of 2 inch strips, 2.5, sorry, inch strips, and keep testing because every machine is totally different. And yeah, I think that's a good way of like starting out. And then making sure they're straight on like a line like this. Honestly, I've been sewing a really long time and mine aren't perfect, so I mean it's keep it as straight as possible, but like it's not like everyone's like sewing the perfect straight, you know. I would just suggest don't like jam through it. Let your machine do its job because your machine wants to sew straight. So if you're just like lightly guiding, barely touching it, your machine's going to sew pretty straight. I mean, it should, and if it's not, then
Yeah.
okay. Yeah, if anyone else has any other tips, I think that's kind of my main ones.
I think it's funny how I feel like people who don't quilt, there's this perception that we're so we're so exactly precise, and some are, but I think it scares some people away, unfortunately. Because I
Yes.
am amazed by garment makers, for example, and I'm intimidated by making clothes. And then I talk to people who make lots of clothes and they say, oh, well, that's scary. And I'm like, what? I'm only working in 2 dimensions. It's fine. You're working in 3.
Yeah.
But they are, I think, are scared off or intimidated by the precision. But I found that, yeah, I mean, the more you sew, the more you'll kind of get a feel for what a 1/4 inch seam looks and feels like, and you'll have a spidey sense when something's off. But you can also get away, I think, with a lot, depending on the pattern, of course,
Yeah,
depending
depending
on
on the
what you
pattern. I will say that some you cannot get away with not using a
yeah. And some need
a
a scant 1/4 inch, like
yeah, so I have a few patterns that need a scant 1/4 inch. I usually rate those like intermediate or advanced beginner. Scant, honestly, I always sew with the scant. So this is kind of like once you really like hone in your 1/4 inch, you'll notice that a scant, essentially to me, it's just compensating for the pressing situation. So when you press, you like a little bit of your fabric is in there. So I kind of always use a scant. So when you get a piece of paper, if you draw a piece of paper, actually, yeah, this is perfect right here. So I have this template. Oh my god, let me just bring this laptop over. I don't know why I'm bending over. Okay, so I have a 1/4 inch line because this is supposed to be where the seam allowance is on this template. So if I put my needle down on this 1/4 inch, I'll go do that real quick. Let me show you. I do not have a chair. Okay. So I am going to line up. I don't know if I can do that. I'm just gonna put my needle down. So I mean, I guess it's pretty much. I don't know if you'll be able to tell, but see how that dot's like just on the outside of that dotted line? That's essentially what a scan seam is. So it's really nothing like too complicated at all. You can play around. You might want to do it even more in just again if you get those strips of fabric, measure what that center strip is, and it should be exactly 2 inches. And then you'll be able to adjust from there. Yeah.
I think to answer Amanda's question, should you use the scant or regular? Is that what you were asking or answering?
I think
I
the
mean,
question is about
Yeah, I mean,
the specific.
I was more answering how
like
to
what
find a
how is
scan.
it? Yeah, okay. Okay, so then yeah,
Yeah,
should I
so
use
should
scant or
is I don't
regular?
know.
And that's like, I think my understanding is that in quilting, if you can get into the habit of always using a scant, there's nothing, I can't think of a situation where people would say, don't use a scant, use a full 1/4 inch.
Yeah.
It's typically only important in certain patterns because you'll have so many parallel seams. And so over time, the 1/4 inch seam actually it doesn't yield the right finished piece because some of the fabric is eaten up with the fold of the
Yeah.
crease, if that makes
Yeah,
sense.
like if there's a pattern with lots and lots of seams, um, like I said, I have a couple, like my Gambit quote, it's just basically like checkered. Um, there's a lot of seams and those strips are pretty small. You have to use a scant because they're just like, if you're off, oh, that's hot. If you're off by like a 16th of an inch or like a hair, just like one needle length over, and you have lots and lots of seams that come together, then you'll just come up short and your quilt would be smaller. But honestly, the key to quilting is consistency. So if you pretty much keep it consistent, the same exact seam allowance throughout the entire pattern, 9 out of 10 times you will be fine.
And this one does not, don't worry about a scant.
Especially this one.
Yeah, no, you should be fine.
Yeah.
Oh, and I saw Cassandra, I'm glad you saw I just happened to, this was coincidental. I posted a kind of quick reel on Instagram that has me quickly going through all of the steps for HRTs. So I'm glad that was helpful for you.
I know, nice. You should post that in the week 4
Oh yeah, I should.
week 4 chat. Just in case people didn't make this and they don't want to watch like a whole Zoom video.
Yeah. I mean, it's 60 seconds, so you'll probably have to watch it a few times, but it goes fast.
And if you guys are wondering if you haven't sewn these up yet, I have sewn and pressed everything already just during this chat. So
Yay, we've got a convert.
pretty quick.
Well, I guess she didn't say that she liked them, but she's glad to learn something new. It could be, I learned something new that I don't want to do again.
I don't know if I like them yet. Okay.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll give you some time. It's all right. They grow on you, I think. Hopefully.
Yeah.